Interesting.
Good morning to all of you. When I look out, I can see the stalwart Colorado River followers here. I'm impressed with your tenacity to stick through and be here on the last day. And we've got a good program here this morning. It's short, and I know everybody wants to get home to go celebrate holidays and spend time with family. But we really appreciate that you've all come out and supported CRWUA. This morning, we've got an esteemed panel here with us. We're excited to have them spend a few minutes talking about near-term analysis of Colorado River Basin storage. I don't know that any one of them really needs an introduction, but I'm going to just touch on this briefly. We have Kuhn here, who's the former general manager of the Colorado River Water Conservation District, and a self-professed, I'm not going to go down that road, right, Eric?
Undrafted free agent.
Yeah, undrafted free agent, okay. And we have Sarah Porter, who we're thrilled to have, director of the Kyle Center for Water Policy at Arizona State University. And next to her is Jack Schmidt, director, Center for Colorado River Studies, Watershed Science Department at Utah State University. I imagine that probably all of you, if not at least many of you, have read much of the work that these folks have done. They are certainly experts and have great insights, and so we're appreciative of them coming and sharing some of those insights with us this morning. So let's give them a round of applause. Thank you.
Thanks, Bart.
Hi, I'm Jack. All right, we ready? There we go. All right. First off, I would just say that, I would describe us as curious people. We are unaffiliated with any organization. We've obviously all been involved. And we occasionally write white papers. And what I'm going to talk about here is a very brief outline of a white paper that we released in September and that we updated in the recent publication that just came out a few days ago by the Colorado River Research Group. And we asked the question, what is the nature of the present water supply situation? Because we were a bit concerned about whether the present status of the system would get potentially swamped by the focus on the post-2026 negotiations. So we're going to talk about the present and near-term situation. And Catherine Sorensen of the Kyle Center at Arizona State is one of the co-authors. She can't be with us, and Sarah Porter, her boss, will make the last remarks, and so that's as good as it can get. We analyze the present situation in the coarsest of ways. We simply developed a water budget, nothing more than checkbook accounting. What goes in, what goes out. The difference between the two is the change in the checking account balance. In this case, the change in reservoir storage. If you use really coarse resolution budgets, these numbers on this plot are for the averages for the 2020 to 2025 period. The inputs are primarily what reclamation estimates to be the natural flows at Lee's Ferry. That's the amount of water up for grabs to be distributed in its use that comes out of the Rocky Mountains. We've got a small amount of inflows that comes in within the Grand Canyon, and every once in a while, a little bit of water leaks out of the Virgin River Basin. And that water is consumed in the upper basin, in the lower basin, or is delivered to Mexico. Now, in this coarse resolution budget, for these set of years in the early 2020s, uses and losses, not counting lower river ET, we have an annual deficit of 1.5 million acre feet. Guess what happens? the reservoir system is further drained because we're taking more out of the checking account than we're putting in. We asked a simple question. No modeling under deep uncertainty. We just asked one simple scenario question. What happens if next year is like last year? Or what happens if this year is like last year? In this course resolution budget, that means that the natural flows out of the upper basin are 8.5 million acre feet. That's Reclamation's estimate of the natural flows for 2025. And we asked, if we don't change our behavior, in other words, consumptive uses and losses in the basin are essentially the same as they have been over the last 5 years, and if the inflows in Grand Canyon are the same as they've been last year, then going forward, the deficit in this year that we look at that's coming at us is 3.6 million acre feet. That simply says we've got to change our behavior soon, because that's what's looking at us right now. Now, to be clear, this is only a scenario. This is not a probability distribution. This is not most probable, least probable. This is simply simple, what if this year is the same as last year? Now, is 3.6 a big number or a small number? That's the other piece of this. So the other significant thing that we considered as a group was the fact that there are various environmental impact statements, records of decision, presentations by Reclamation, and administrative decisions that all point to the fact that some amount of active storage in the system is not readily accessible because it's either below power plant capacity, it's below a level at which everybody gets concerned and people say, whoa, we don't want to, be down in that operating range. If we go below the power plant, the elevation of the penstocks at Glen Canyon Dam, then the only way water can be released is through the river outlet works. No one wants to run the river outlet works 24/7, 365. And Reclamation is going to do everything it can to not get near that level. And so we should realize that there are engineering, infrastructure, hydropower, political, legal, and environmental reasons why no one wants to be down in that part of active storage where water management gets very complicated. And for just Glen Canyon, just for Lake Mead and Lake Powell, the amount of water that is below 3,500 feet elevation in Powell or below 1,000 feet elevation in Lake Mead is 8.7 million acre feet. Off the table. We're not saying that water's inaccessible, but we're reminding all of us that's really complicated use of water. And if we remember the presentation by Carly Jurla yesterday, Carly primarily referred to 1035 as an elevation at which operations at Lake Mead get really complicated. That adds an additional 2.2 million acre feet of water that gets really complicated. In other words, the amount of active storage that gets really complicated is nearly 11 million acre feet. And we only have 15 in Powell and Mead today. That's pretty humbling. Okay, so to be quick, we did our analysis in early September. So this is a pattern of total storage in Powell and Mead in the orange line, and the black dot is our projection of conditions in September of next year. And I've drawn two dashed lines, which are the lower line, the original threshold we considered of when it gets really complicated, and then the line I added yesterday after hearing the remarks by Reclamation. We would, if we use the lower line, and we go like this, we're going to have less than 4 million acre feet above when it gets really complicated, just a year from now, if this winter is the same as last winter, and if we don't change how we're operating the system. And that's pretty humbling. Now, one might ask, you know, it rained this fall, and the good news is that rain did, in fact, make some difference. We took a nudge back from the edge of the cliff because we had inflows to Lake Powell, and you can see the lower right graph of the spike of inflow and the rise in Lake Powell. And it took 6 weeks for Powell to get back down to where it had been just before those rains and inflows came. So in fact, we delayed the depletion of Powell by 6 weeks. And notably, at Lake Mead, the reductions and releases from Hoover Dam that began on November 24th significantly have led to some recovery in Powell that is now, in Mead, that is now beginning to approach 500,000 acre feet of rise in storage, which reminds us that if you shut down the drain of a bathtub, the bathtub starts to fill. But nevertheless, the dominant influence on the system is, in fact, snowmelt inflow. And that's where the action is. So I'll leave it at that. Let's talk about and remember realistically accessible storage. That's a threshold at which below that, water management gets complicated, really complicated. We're not saying it's the end of American civilization, but we should not fool ourselves. There's a whole bunch of activities, including environmental compliance in Grand Canyon, that get very difficult to meet, and we're very close to that. Let's hope it snows, but in the absence of that, we have to think seriously about quickly reducing our consumption. Thanks.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be here. I think I was counting. I think this is my 44th CRWUA. I hope there's 44 more, but I'm not guaranteeing that. As they put up my slides here, I wanted to talk a little bit about this year, why we're at risk of having another dry year. And in my slide, I mentioned 4. Jim Prairie added a 5th when I was talking to him yesterday. The snowpack's off to a dry start. We're 60%. We may have some good precipitation coming into the southern part of the basin after Christmas. But I was talking to Taylor Hawes, who lives in Summit County. They're looking at additional 2 to 5 inches of snow between now and New Year's. It's not good. Expect that 60% to be less than 60% in early January. The second is there's a lot of vacant space upstream reservoirs. If you're an upstream reservoir operator, you're going to want to store every drop you can. Every drop of water that's stored upstream of Powell doesn't get to Powell, and a lot of that's going to be used. So in dry years, succeeding dry years, Powell does not see unregulated inflow. It sees regulated inflow, and regulated inflow is going to be significantly cut down by vacant storage space upstream. The third is in much of the basin, soil moisture is below average. That's not true in the San Juans, but it's true in the headwaters of the Colorado that give us 50, 60% of the runoff. Finally, the ocean conditions. We talk about ENSO, but there's a lot of research about something called the PDO and the AMO and their relationship to dry years. Right now, we are in the worst quadrant. The PDO is at record negative, record cold. The AMO is at record positive. When you look at past years, that's a trouble. And the fifth problem, or the fifth really good reason that we're in for a dry year is because Jim Prairie brought a season pass to go skiing this year. So Here's just vacant space. You can see over there is Green Mountain. The black is where we are today. The red is where we were in 22, and the orange is where we were last year. This is just one example. The other one, as I wanted to show, is Flaming Gorge. Why is Flaming Gorge important? There's about 3 million acre-feet of water up there. If we have a big deficit under CRWUA, we're going to need a lot of water to maintain Powell above minimum power. There are 2 ways you can keep Powell above 3,500. That's a big release from Flaming Gorge or reducing the outflows. Right now it's 748. Bureau of Reclamation can go down to 6 under the supplemental EIS. Big problem. Now this is, Carly talked about this yesterday. This is just a drawing of it. We can see the green is the most probable, the red is the least probable, or min probable. 90% of years in the 30-year record are above that. And I'm telling you right now, this is optimistic. The River Forecast Center's daily model is up and running, and we've already lost, from April to July, another 500,000 acre-feet beyond what was assumed when this 24-month study was together. On an annual basis, that's about 700,000 or 800,000 acre-feet. So what was 8 in November, 7 in December is likely to be 6 after January. Now, good news is ocean conditions may be changing. We may be in for a wet year, but don't count on it. And question here is then, what do we need to maintain Powell above 3,500? If we have a repeat of a 1921 year, we could have a shortfall in maintaining Powell above 3,500, above minimum power, plus a tiny cushion of 2 to 3 million acre-feet. Where's that 3 million acre-feet going to come from? Reducing inflows, or increasing inflows from a big Flaming Gorge release. Those of you who think that's simple should have heard the UCRC meeting when the commissioners were talking about that. It's not. There are some political issues there. And reducing the annual release. Now, if we reduce the annual release from 7.5 to 7, we run into something we don't want to talk about, but it's there. It's the elephant in the room. It's called the compact. And if we reduce it from 7.5 to 7, we run the risk of dropping leaf area flows below what certain states in the lower division believe is their entitlement under the compact. We're in the gray area at 7. If we go to 6.5 or 6, we're not in the gray area. So the Secretary has some really, really difficult decisions. We're at a point where there are no easy decisions. And what I believe is before the Secretary can make some of these difficult decisions, the states need to really come together, at least on a short-term agreement, to figure out how they're going to avoid litigation. Thank you.
Good morning. The group that authored the report, Jack and Eric, Ann Castle, John Fleck, Catherine Sorensen, and Catherine Terra, were dubbed by one journalist the Traveling Wilburys, which older people in this audience might remember was like a dream band of great rock stars. And so it's a good name. I'm not a member of the Traveling Wilburys. I'm a groupie. Sometimes I get to carry their speakers. But I'm honored to be up here, and I think I'm here because they needed to avoid a mantle, and they needed someone from the lower basin. I'm very grateful to Catherine Sorensen for throwing me under the bus here. And I don't have much that I can add, except to say, when we're thinking about what are the prospects for a good winter, how should, we can't just think about the Colorado Basin. Colorado also depends on a good winter. The State Water Project depends on a good winter, and all of the possibilities that Eric suggested for a normal to bad snowpack or snow water equivalents in the Colorado Basin apply to the Sierra Nevadas. And in fact, in the West, as of December 5th, it was the Sierra Nevadas that were the most, at this point, the driest, having the worst snow year. Of course, we all know things can change, but we don't plan on the hope that we'll have great snow. And if that happens, if the State Water Project has a bad year too for California, then that forces decision-making around Colorado River supplies, around possibly intentionally created surplus, other types of decision-making that will have an impact on storage in Lake Mead and potentially Lake Powell. The other point is that we can be here at CRWUA and really focus on what's going on with the Colorado River and really focus on hydrology. But of course, in the bigger context, there's potential for disruption or change that could make achieving the kind of short-term or near-term water conservation harder, could make achieving a bigger deal harder without significant momentum and consensus on the part of the states. So since Eric mentioned the tripwire, we see that tripwire could be passed right before midterm elections when 6 of the Basin states are going to be electing a new governor. That can mean different leadership, different strategy with respect to the negotiations. Potentially it could put Colorado River negotiations into the political sphere in those elections. Jack talked about how we are potentially hitting a 21st century low storage level in short order after our midterm elections. And then on its heels will be our 2028 elections, where there will be very likely, a great deal of change in elected leadership throughout the Basin and nationally. Those contexts, I think, should be sobering and should cause us to redouble our efforts, I would say, to reach an agreement. I would also say I added up and averaged out how long compact litigations have taken in the 21st century, and the average is about 8 years. So I could have added that timeline, but we don't want to go there. My final comment is that you should get out your phone and take a snap of this QR code. This is a link to the study that Eric and Jack presented on, and it's well worth reading. It will give you a really good perspective on the state of the Colorado River, and as Jack said, what we have control over is how much we take out without significant near-term conservation. Their report suggests throughout the basin, conservation throughout the basin, then we have a big possibility of very, very low storage and conflict in the years ahead. Thank you. Oh, now I have the privilege of introducing Keith Burron, who will be bringing up the next panel. Thank you.
All right, well done.
Well done.
Oh, well, good for you to do that.
I think I'll say
It's perfect. We're next to each other.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Oh.
Well, we have arrived at the last panel for CRWUA this session, and it's my pleasure to be able to facilitate a panel of the principals. This morning, we have all 7 of the governor's representatives that are actively involved in trying to address these Colorado River issues. Back when we sent invitations as the planning committee, we were unsure of where the status of discussions would be on the river by the time we got to CRWUA. So what we asked the principals to be available to do was to provide perspectives on how to successfully move forward together. And we heard yesterday that, well, as we know, the principals have been meeting for many months now on a regular basis. So my job facilitating this panel is pretty easy. I think these folks are very familiar with talking amongst each other. We heard yesterday that the time is short. There's 59 days. Delay is unacceptable. So no pressure, folks. To set out the order for our presentation today, in true Vegas fashion, we drew cards. And so the order that I'm going to introduce the principals. I'll just give a brief introduction. The full bios are in the program, but I will introduce them in the order that they're going to be speaking based on the luck of the draw. Our first principal to speak will be Gene Shawcroft. He's the general manager for the Central Utah Water Conservancy District and Utah's commissioner on the Upper Colorado River Commission. Our second speaker will be Brandon Gebhart, Wyoming state engineer and Wyoming's commissioner on the Upper Colorado River Commission. And then we will have J.B. Hamby, who is the chairman of the Colorado River Board of California and the state of California's Colorado River Commissioner. And then we will have Becky Mitchell, state of Colorado's commissioner on the Upper Colorado River Commission. And Tom Buschatzke, the director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources and Arizona's principal negotiator on Colorado River matters. He will be followed by Estevan López, New Mexico's Upper Colorado River Commissioner and Governor's representative on Colorado River matters. And finally, John Entsminger.
Don't bet against Nevada.
It was the luck of the draw.
The house always wins.
Ace is a 1 in some.
General manager.
Not in poker, it ain't.
1 or 11.
How does this happen? So, General Manager of Southern Nevada Water Authority and Las Vegas Valley Water District, and the governor's representative for Nevada on Colorado River matters. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Gene. If each of you could spend 6-7 minutes, we should be great.
Okay, thank you, Keith. It's good to see you all this morning. My luck in Las Vegas isn't very good. I ended up with an 8. I thought, well, 8, that's got to be middle of the pack. But 8 is the low card in this business, so here I am. I wanted to just take a minute and share some things from the state of Utah as I dive into these remarks. Jack and Eric, for those of you that were here, saw some pretty depressing numbers. I love Jack Schmidt, but I'm not sure I've ever seen him give us an optimistic report. So Jack, did you work on that a little bit? Thanks. With regard to hydrology, October was an incredibly wet month for the most part, in the state of Utah. Salt Lake City received over 5 inches of precipitation in the month of October. We had some cheering folks in our area because of that, assuming and thinking and hoping and praying that that luck would continue. Turns out that's not the case. November was not only dry, but it was 7.5 degrees above normal. 7.5 degrees above normal. About 93% of the state of Utah is currently in a drought under the drought monitoring scenarios. Last summer, water rights were cut extremely early. Henry's Fork, which is a tributary to the Green River, were cut to an 1899 priority in July. Water rights on the Ashley Creek, also a tributary to the Green River, were cut down to a 1911 priority as of the 30th of May. And that typically doesn't happen until late June or even early July. In the Great Basin, Salt Lake Basin, water rights on the Ogden River were cut below 1862 starting on the 4th of July. So it was extremely dry. That's not a secret to anyone. One of the things that I want to make sure you all understand is we are doing a tremendous amount of efforts, conservation in the state of Utah. Our legislature has authorized over $500 million over the last couple of years for water conservation activities to support not only the Colorado River, but the Great Salt Lake as well. The Colorado River Authority of Utah Board launched a 2-year demand management program in 2025 and 26. The board initially approved 4 multi-participant projects. And then just last week, the authority board approved an additional 10 projects. These projects are significant. However, the amount of water that's available is not great. Over those 2-year period of time, we assume that there will generate approximately 20,000 acre feet. And that is huge for those who contribute that. And yet at the same time, when you look at balancing the river system, that doesn't make a huge difference. The other thing I would just mention is this pilot program, the management pilot program, allows us to learn some things, some real world experiences. For example, one of the projects we had was on the Duchesne River. On a normal year, we get about 4,500 acre feet from those diversions. This year, as part of the program, those diversions were contributed to the project, and about 1,000 acre feet was actually available. So less than 25% of what we anticipated is what we got. Again, Mother Nature is in control very forcefully, and we see that every day. We're also involved in many, many other conservation programs. The Central Utah Water District alone offered or awarded over $150,000 of money for landscape incentives just last week. And so there are many things going on, and most people refer to that as a turf removal program. When it comes to the 2026 negotiations, one of the things that we are wrestling with is the upper initial units, how we deal with the upper initial units. And the upper initial units are, of course, first of all, Lake Powell, and then Flaming Gorge, Blue Mesa, and Navajo. Those are the 4 upper initial units. There was a promise made over 100 years ago under the compact that we in the Upper Basin would get to deliver and use water. Right now, it seems like the real focus is what can we do to get more water to the lower basin. We're trying to understand how we can develop some resiliency in the upper basin, and these upper initial units play a key role in that. This water is for the purpose of supporting the upper basin and uses, and also to meet its obligations, there's no doubt. The Upper Basin states, in coordination with Reclamation, have utilized some of that water to temporarily benefit Lake Powell as it approaches critical elevations. We're willing to continue to take temporary actions to protect the operations of Glen Canyon, but the water in those reservoirs exists for a purpose of Upper Basin management. Water in the upper initial units is at best a one-time Band-Aid, and we need to be very judicious about how that water is used and when it's used in order for us to more fully operate and benefit the system as a whole. To conclude, I will just say that we are still at the table. We're working hard. We are committed to a 7-state consensus agreement, and my opinion is progress is being made, and we'll be prepared to share with Reclamation information that will allow us to move forward as we meet the February 14th deadline. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shawcroft. Commissioner Gebhart.
Thanks, Keith. Good morning, everybody. For those of you that were here last year, you probably know that I have a little bit of a potty mouth. But I vowed not to say bullshit this year, so I'm not going to.
How goes that?
2 for 2, Brandon.
Oh, I did say it, didn't I? Thanks for being here. We're happy to be here. We've had some good conversations, good hallway conversations. But, you know, we all recognize that we have a responsibility to deliver a solution to this basin, a solution that respects and reflects each and every interest across the entire basin, a consensus solution, not a solution that will be perfect for anyone, a consensus solution. That is our responsibility, and we have failed to deliver. But none of us are done trying. I made a promise to develop a consensus solution, and I intend to do everything in my power to keep that promise. We need to remember that hydrology is the problem. It's not political positions, it's not legal interpretations, it's not one state. It's the entire basin, the hydrology of the entire basin. That is the problem we're solving. For years, the basin states, all of us that rely on the Colorado River, have been realizing the burden of a decreasing supply. Wyoming and the upper basin states haven't been insulated from this reality, and we aren't ignoring it either. I realize and appreciate that the lower basin states have taken significant actions and made significant investments to reduce demand on the Colorado River, and they plan to do more. I know those actions affect real people. They have real impacts on Wyoming's neighbors, and we need to respect those actions. Hydrology forces actions in the to our water users in the upper basin as well each year. There has been and continues to be an enormous amount of work in the upper basin to develop tools and solutions to the problem we all face, hydrology. In 2019, we committed to investigate the feasibility of demand management in the upper basin. We conducted a robust study and fulfilled that commitment. It was intended to provide us the opportunity to move forward. It did move the ball forward. It allowed us and our water users to continue to work together to be part of the solution. It helped us identify what wouldn't work and identified opportunities. It built essential relationships and knowledge. It gave us a chance to learn. Our actions now are just an extension of that work, which has never stopped. It has only evolved. We continue to do more. Wyoming and the other upper basin states have done an enormous amount of work to help find solutions for the entire river community. That work will continue. We are actively pursuing flexible tools to help the overall system and also help our own water users better manage through a declining water supply and plan for an uncertain future. The basin starts in places like the Upper Green River, not Lake Powell. Our tools need to address the upstream impacts, not just the downstream impacts. Wyoming's water users are engaged. Building on previous success, Wyoming and the other upper basin states implemented a system conservation pilot program in 23 and 24. In Wyoming, our users conserved 37,600 acre feet from 52 different projects. That may not seem like much water to the larger basin, but that's about 25% of Wyoming's post-compact use. Additionally, those efforts provided valuable information to help our water users understand the benefits and impacts that conservation may have on their operations and how conservation may be used to build resiliency in drought. We are still seeking reauthorization of the SCPP and the funding that could bring for long-term water efficiency and conservation. In Wyoming, we are currently deploying about $15 million of federal and state funding to perform studies, develop programs, and build flexibility to keep us moving forward. It will help us be part of a basin-wide solution and also help provide Wyoming water users and water managers with resources to help withstand the impacts of drought and a dwindling supply. We currently have 14 active projects. These projects are to help us understand complex consumptive use of our water, determine transit and conveyance loss associated with that use, improve stream flow measurement, install new measurement equipment on thousands of diversions, investigate various methods and ways to conserve consumptive use, improve tracking and accounting of conserved water as it moves through the system. We've collectively been saying for 2 years that the Upper Basin is willing to be part of the problem.
Exactly.
Panel over.
That's a wrap.
At least they're listening.
I missed it. What did you say?
Strike that.
Bullshit.
No, we do want to be part of the solution. And the one way we've proposed that is voluntary conservation. In Wyoming, through the legislative interim period, we have worked with our water users, stakeholders, and legislative committees to draft legislation for our legislature to consider to develop a pilot water conservation program. We will meet with that committee again in January, one final time before the session starts in February. For water conservation to be effective in Wyoming, we know that voluntary conservation must work for Wyoming water users, and they need to see their efforts are being matched across the basin. We also know that it must be set up to fit into a larger Upper Basin program designed as part of a whole basin solution. Recently, the Upper Basin states, in coordination with Reclamation, have utilized water stored in the upstream initial units that Gene mentioned. These were to mitigate risks of low reservoir elevations in Lake Powell. We are willing to continue to take temporary actions to protect the operations at Glen Canyon Dam, so long as they're only used when needed and their other purposes are properly maintained. Wyoming didn't cause the problem, but we haven't escaped the impacts. We also can't escape the fact that we're connected to the bigger river system. Wyoming and the other Upper Basin states are fulfilling our commitments, and we are fully committed to being part of the solution. Suggestions to the contrary to fail to recognize what's actually happening.
Thank you, Commissioner Gebhart. Commissioner Hamby, you're next.
California is here to save the Colorado River. Yay. California has the largest stake in the Colorado River. We have the greatest ag production in the basin, and half of the population lives within our state. If the river fails, no one feels it harder or bigger than California does. We're willing to step up and save the Colorado River, but California can't do it alone. We're willing to sacrifice for the shared river that we all are interested in protecting, but not so that any element of this basin, any sector, state, basin, or country can opt out. California is the only state in the basin putting water on the table that we're not legally obligated to. Whether it's 8.23 compact compliant releases or 4.4 that's protected under federal law, California isn't legally obligated to put a drop of water on the table. So why are we contributing 440,000 acre feet a year, a number larger than many states' consumptive use in the basin? Because it's what the river needs and demands. I want to put things into perspective of where we've been in the past number of years and where we're trying to go very shortly here in the next few months. In the 2007 guidelines, the greatest degree of shortage that was ever contemplated, and only when Lake Mead was practically dry, was 625,000 acre feet. The 2019 DCP, recognizing more needed to be done than that, only added up to 1.375 million acre feet, and only when Lake Mead was practically empty. Now, the lower basin has put forward a proposal and a plan for 1.5 million acre feet every single year, an amount of water that equals the entire entitlement of the country of Mexico. We put this forward to resolve the outstanding, long unresolved structural deficit within the basin and to build a buffer against drought and climate change. For me personally, having spent a lot of time very early on in the Upper Basin and at one point going to a Colorado River District conference in Grand Junction and hearing a lot about the structural deficit, personally to me, it never made sense for the Upper Basin to have to use less while the Lower Basin was exceeding the amount of water that the compact made available to us. So as we started this post-2026 process and we developed the scoping, it was important for me and for California to fix this problem and to step up and do more than any of the prior rules did to resolve this problem. This was meant to unlock and move forward basin-wide progress. And we said this and announced this back in CRWUA 2023. It's now 2025. We're here in a different hotel a couple years later, but the same problems are on the table. In the last 2 years, we've been spinning our wheels. But I want to point out a couple of things. That without California, there would be no cohesive lower basin approach that we're taking for granted very much today, if you remember where we were at the beginning of 2023. Now we have to address a fundamental question as part of these 2026 guidelines that we've been avoiding for too long. If more is needed than this enormous amount of water being reduced every single year where 80% of the population and 80% of the productive agriculture occurs, what happens then? If more is needed, is that an upper basin problem? If more is needed, is that a lower basin problem? I'm here to tell you that it's neither, that this is a shared problem that we all have a responsibility to answer. California and the lower basin cannot solve this problem alone. Time is running short. You'll hear it in lots of newspaper articles and panels here this week, countdown and how many days to the next deadline. I'm also here to tell you that time has been wasted, and like water, that's a very precious resource. We need to live with the river that we have, not the one that we wished we had in 1922. California has done what we're supposed to do morally, even if we're not required to do that legally. Every state must take that approach if we're going to have success in post-2026. Another point I want to make is in California, first by saying there's a lot of sensitivity about words within the basin, and sensitivity is about use. In California, the word conservation is something that we celebrate. I want to point out a very special number this year. In 2025, California's use is the lowest it's been since 1949, the lowest it's been in 75 years. And to that, what do we do, California? We applaud it. Reducing use to live with the resource that we have is not something to be afraid of. It's something to embrace and something that we look forward to doing as part of a 7-state consensus on the river moving forward past 2026. We've done our part in California. We're willing to do more. Now it's time for everyone to do it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamby. Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you, Keith. It's an honor and pleasure to be here today alongside my Colorado River family. And as you all know, sometimes you can't pick your family, but you get through it anyway. And that's what we're here to do. And so as we sit here, I want to provide an update of where things are from my perspective. I know you all are curious. In partnership with our fellow upper division states, Colorado remains fully committed to reaching a 7-state consensus. We've put forward numerous proposals that comply with the law of the river and that include recognition of the exclusive and perpetual rights afforded to not just one basin, but both basins. And they work to stabilize the entire system, both in the near future and sustain it into the future. We remain at the table. Some may wonder why sometimes, but it's because it's the bigger picture that we need to focus on. And we all believe that we should be focusing on developing the final details of a deal at this point. We have and will continue to find compromise. We have not fully developed into our allocation, and everyone has to acknowledge that we take shortages every year. We've put a lot on the table in these negotiations, but I want to discuss the biggest thing that we offer. Many do not understand about strict administration and what that means. They don't understand the strict administration of water rights and the pain that is felt, not only in Colorado, but across the entire upper basin. This strict administration results in greater flows leaving the state than would occur without these actions. These actions, plus aggressive conservation, we also celebrate conservation, contribute to an average of over 8 million acre-feet of water that flow out of Colorado alone from the Colorado River and its tributaries every year. For many water users across the upper basin, this has led to a death of 1,000 cuts. Over the last 20 years, many water users have had to make heartbreaking decisions. They're on the front lines. They cull their herds, fallow their fields, lay off workers, and go out of business even entirely. This is a precarious time. We're in a precarious time because we are bringing every resource the upper basin has to this battle with hydrology, and none of it feels like it's been enough. While the average flows from Lake Powell have been 8.6 million acre-feet, during that same time, we saw an average of 1.3 million acre-feet of shortages in the upper basin. What does that represent? It represents 17% of what the compact allocated the upper basin. It represents over 25% of the demand in the upper basin. That's an average of shortages that we experience every year. Sometimes it's more than that. I want to be clear, with the current dire conditions at Lake Powell and Lake Mead, where more is leaving than is coming in, we're at a point where we have no hedge against dry hydrology. No one is too big to fail. At the same time, I want to acknowledge what the lower basin has put on the table. The 1.5 million acre-feet structural deficit, long acknowledged as needing to be addressed, is a huge step. It is a huge step. But what Mother Nature has said is she is demanding more. And where do we go from there? I want to turn a little bit, and you've heard my upper basin partners talk about what they're doing within their own states. And they are not alone in that. Colorado is proactively implementing aggressive conservation goals that we've laid out in Colorado's water plan. Through that water plan, we prioritize conservation, reuse, and multi-beneficial projects to achieve conservation. We've awarded over $127 million in grants across 530 projects in the state. It helps ensure that a healthy Colorado River flows out of our state. The municipalities in Colorado are increasingly moving towards adopting inclining block rate structures and water budgets to use water as wisely as possible. In Denver water alone, we've seen more than a 40% reduction in residential per capita use and 16% reduction in total deliveries, despite growing more than 29% since 2000. Colorado Springs has seen a 41% reduction in residential per capita water use and about 20% drop in total water deliveries, despite growing 39%. We've implemented multiple legislative priorities and initiatives, such as WaterSense certified fixtures, saving billions upon billions of gallons. The legislature clearly and consistently supports water conservation. Things like non-functional turf, invasive plant species bans, all of this requiring water entities to report their water use and conservation data and move the needle. Water reuse is not only expected, but is required. It is an important tool for trans-mountain diverters, like some of the utilities that I mentioned, to not only reuse their water, but reuse the water to extinction. Denver Water, the state's largest water provider, has plans to build enough recycled water infrastructure to offset the potable water equivalent serving approximately 43,000 households. Along with that, we're doing things in the ag sector, looking at alternative foraging, efficient infrastructure, crop rotation, deficit irrigation, on the innovative cutting edge. That being said, I want to acknowledge our partners also across the basin. On Monday, there was an urban water users summit, I guess I would call it. I don't know the official name. And I heard from one of our water users, they were so proud and wanted to be able to talk about what they were doing, and they were so proud. And what they heard was across the basin, so many people were doing amazing things. There were examples from Metropolitan Water District about the cutting edge reuse and the work that they were doing on that. The use of alternative sources and managing that supply. We're sitting in Nevada where they're leading in cutting edge innovation and leading in water conservation. My partners in New Mexico and in Albuquerque have reduced their per capita use so significantly that it gives Nevada a run for their money. Cheyenne, Phoenix, Tucson, all of those people were heard from, and all of those cities were doing something. That is a huge thing in the basin. So long story short, I think Colorado's invested its own money. We know others are doing the same. And we've invested our own money and our own resources into water conservation and efficiency. And there is an invisible string tying these efforts. Our strict water use regulations benefiting the Colorado River system, and I want to make it more visible, and that was my intention with what I'm talking about. As this over 8 million acre feet flow out of Colorado from the Colorado River and its tributaries every year, that is largely because of what we're doing. As we think about the future, we know that we can't leave anyone behind. On Monday, we heard from the 6 Upper Basin tribes, but we've also been in communication and heard much from the tribal sovereigns in the Lower Basin. As we think about the future, we need to think about creative solutions, deferral pools in both Lake Powell and Lake Mead, some way for the tribes to be acknowledged for their settled and developed or undeveloped water rights. Some sort of deferral pool. We know that this is important because there may be need for cuts larger than 1.5. With all that being said, I know this is so hard to believe and when you hear the dire times, but I remain optimistic. I remain optimistic not because we know the exact solution, but because we're still at the table and we have no choice. Mother Nature will win this battle. She will win it over and over again. She will continue to give us the lessons that we do not learn. And until we learn them, they will be here for us. So although these are challenging times, I do remain optimistic. And I'm hopeful that the 7 Basin states and my Colorado River family can do something, and we can do it together.
Thank you, Commissioner Mitchell. Director Buschatzke, you're up next.
Thank you. So I first want to start by saying, and you've heard it from everyone here so far, Arizona is committed to finding a collaborative path forward. We, better than anyone, know the risks of litigation. We thought we had a pretty good victory in Arizona v. California. That was illusory, as we found out later. Regardless, I want to start, and I don't have time to go through all the things Arizona's been doing, but I'll just throw one number out there. Over the last 10 or 11 years, there's 5.5 million acre-feet of Arizona water sitting in Lake Mead that would not have been there but for conservation and mandatory cuts imposed upon us. So it was a big lift and a lot of pain to do that. I also want to really focus more on maybe what the question was, from my view, what it's going to take to get a deal. And I'll share that in detail. But before I do that, I want to thank Interior Secretary Burgon. A couple weeks ago, he sent a letter to all of us asking the 7 governors and the 7 of us to show up in Washington, D.C. on December 8th. I think that was true leadership to try to help move things forward. Unfortunately, that meeting did not happen. There were governors who could not show up to the meeting. Hopefully that meeting maybe can occur after the first of the year, because I think it's critical that that happens. So we already heard JB talk about the structural deficit, which is about 1.2 million acre-feet. We put 1.5 million acre-feet of cuts on the table to cover not only the structural deficit, which we have no legal obligation to do, but also to have another 300,000 acre-feet or so to try to rebuild some storage in Lake Mead. Arizona is on the hook for 27% of its Colorado River allocation as part of that 1.5 million acre-feet proposal from California, Nevada, and hopefully Mexico. So what are the things we need? And all of this is really in the context of what we've heard from the Upper Basin they would like to see come out of this, and I would like to see this too, and that is some temporary waiver, my lawyers don't like that term, temporary waiver of compact compliance, right? And we are right on the edge. You heard Eric right before talk about if the flow from Powell to Mead this year goes below 748, we might trigger a compact compliance outcome. So first, we need water to be part of this solution from the upper initial units under the authority that the federal government holds to operate those units. We need conservation in the upper basin that is verifiable and mandatory. My cuts under the 1.5 million acre-foot proposal and anything more that's going to happen will be mandatory. My water users will not have a choice. And we need that parity from the upper basin. And I recognize the difficulties that that might create just from an administration standpoint. In the lower basin, we have major diversion points. It's easier to just cut the diversions from those points. IID's got many, many licenses. In its service area, they find a way to cut. And I understand in the upper basin, they've got thousands of water users and water rights. But I believe that's just an implementation issue that can be worked through. We're asking the upper basin to share with us if more than 1.5 million acre feet is needed, right? We have maintained our offer of the 1.5 million acre feet as the first cuts. But if we need more, and there are many bad hydrologies, or maybe even medium hydrologies, in which we might need more, we're asking for them to share in that burden on a 50-50 basis, 1 for 1, whether that's 100,000 acre feet above 1.5, 500,000 acre feet above 1.5, whatever that is. So for me, to sign on to a deal, especially one that includes giving a temporary waiver of compact compliance, I have to go to my legislature and get that approval. And I will say right now, I do not think there is anything on the table from the upper basin that would compel me to do that today. So I've listed out some of the things that I see as necessary, and I hope that we can continue to move forward and close the loop. And you can imagine the things I listed are things we have been talking about. We've been talking about those things for 2+ years, but we've not found a way to break the logjam and kind of the stalemate maybe that we're in right now. So I also wanted to talk about the near term. Eric again mentioned the problem that we're having at Lake Powell. Arizona is willing to be part of that solution along with the upper basin. In 2022, we agreed to reduce the flow from Powell to Meade by 480,000 acre feet. The upper basin moved some DROA water, so we had a collective outcome there to help protect Powell then. So I'm ready, willing, and able, if we need to contribute to that kind of protection in the near term. And it's going to be difficult if we have to do that. At the same time, we're trying to have a longer term, post-2026 collaborative outcome. So I think that will, I'll sum up my remarks again, just by reminding everyone that we have taken substantial action. We've put substantial volumes of water on the table. We will continue to be at the table and try to move forward in these negotiations to come up with something that we all can live with. And hopefully next year at this time, we're standing here saying we achieved that end. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Buschatzke. Commissioner López.
Thank you, Keith, and good morning to all of you. It's great to, well, I'm kind of amazed how many people are here at the very end of the conference. You know, I think it speaks to what's at stake in these negotiations, the fact that you would want to stay and listen to what we have to say. But, you know, I was reminded this morning that this is the Colorado River Water Users Conference. You guys are the stars. The water users are the stars here. All of you are. And your water uses are really important. You've heard from each of my preceding speakers, and you'll hear from all of us just how important they are to us. But we know that the lower basin water uses are incredibly important. There's such a big economy. There's so much population. There's so much going on in the lower basin. We rely on it for food. Their water uses are really important. But that doesn't mean the upper basin is any less important. Our water users similarly are important. Their economy, while it may not be the same thing, it's important. We are part of the system. And well, I'll come back to this, but tribal users. Tribal users, you know, they're the senior most users on the entire system. And yet, many of the tribes don't even have quantified water rights settlements, and some of them that do haven't been able to develop their water. A few are fortunate and they've been able to do that. But you know, in the last few years, we've really engaged with the Upper Basin tribes in a Upper Basin state / tribal water dialogue. And what I've learned from that is, in spite of those facts, they're willing to participate in finding solutions. So I think that's incredibly important. Mexico's water uses are incredibly important to them. They haven't really been at the table yet, but we're about to engage them. The environment and what it brings to our lives, what the river brings to our lives is incredibly important. Unfortunately, as you've heard over and over here today, the river is much drier and the reservoirs are much more depleted than we've become accustomed to. So with that kind of as a background, let me talk about a few things that are going on in New Mexico, and some of these are outside of the basin. Where right now, New Mexico is settling interstate litigation with Texas and Colorado and Interior that has been going on for about 14 years on the Rio Grande. During that time, New Mexico has spent tens of millions of dollars. I don't know how many millions of dollars each of the other states have spent, but I'm sure it's tens of millions of dollars. There has been no certainty during that time as to what anybody has in terms of water rights. We finally got an agreement, and it's before the special master to give a recommendation, and hopefully we can get that whole case resolved soon. But I just bring this up to highlight the fact that if we sink into litigation here, that's probably the absolute worst outcome we could have. There will be no certainty for perhaps a decade. Earlier I heard the average litigation is 8 years. I don't think we have 2 years to waste. I don't think we have any time to waste. And then still outside of the basin, but illustrative of the problem, is the Rio Grande. You know, we've experienced this drying perhaps about a decade earlier than what the Colorado is. And maybe it's only, maybe it's largely because of the huge amounts of water that were in storage in Meade and Powell. But nevertheless, right now on the Rio Grande, Elephant Butte Reservoir, the largest reservoir on that river, is at 5%. We've been reduced to essentially a run-of-the-river operation for that river. That could be the future we're facing on this river very, very shortly, unless we take action to do something different. In New Mexico, this year has been incredibly dry and difficult, and that's highlighted by shortages, and this is just easy to point to. The San Juan Chama diversions, it's a trans-basin diversion that brings water into Albuquerque and Santa Fe. This year it was shorted by 70%. The biggest shortage yet. And up until 2014, we had the luxury of those. It was a full supply every year. Since then, it's been shorted almost every year. That's where we're headed. I mentioned the tribes earlier. We're working really hard with the Navajo Nation to try and develop their their drinking water systems. It's the 21st century, and many people in the Navajo Nation still don't have drinking water. So it's imperative that we get that done. We're working with the Jicarilla Apache Nation. We've entered into a really innovative lease with them and the Nature Conservancy. And so I'm going to take an issue with what JB said earlier. California is not the only state that is putting water. We don't have any obligation to do anything right now. We're in compact compliance, and yet we are putting water on the table. We've leased water from the Jicarilla Apaches to build a conservation, or we're calling it a contribution pool, because in this instance, this is not water that's necessarily been being conserved, but rather we're using that water specifically to put into a reserve. And we're doing it today. We've been doing it for the last few years. And to date, we haven't gotten any credit for it, but we're working on it on a provisional accounting memorandum of understanding with the Upper Basin and Reclamation to account for how much of that water is reaching Lake Powell, and we hope to get credit for it and start building that that pool and accruing water for what comes next. I also need to take issue with something that that Tom said. He talked about the need for mandatory reductions and the fact that we are unwilling to do that. I think we've been pretty clear, we are unwilling to require additional mandatory reductions on our water users. But here's the reality. The Upper Basin has developed, we have not been able to develop to our full compact apportionment. We've been able to develop something on the order of 5.1 million acre feet. And because of hydrology in various parts of the basin, on average, every year, our water users collectively are shorted on average about 1.3 million off of that 5.1. That's a 25% reduction that I would argue is as mandatory as anything anybody will ever face, because the water is not there. So our water users are feeling it. In some of these negotiations, we've often heard, well, if we're feeling a lot of pain down here in the lower basin, and I know they are. We've also heard, you guys need to feel pain also. We feel it. We feel it. Our water users feel that pain, so it's real. I'll wind it down. Like my fellows here, New Mexico is at the table. New Mexico is committed to finding a consensus. And like all of you and like all of my colleagues here, I'm really frustrated that we haven't gotten to a consensus solution yet. After 3 years of discussion, JB says we're wasting our time. I think we have wasted a lot of that time, but we've also, because of the conversations that we've been having, we've kind of figured out some things that we know aren't going to work for us. Right now, at least in my mind's eye, I can see a path forward. I can see how we can get an agreement. I hope each of my colleagues can as well. And I'm certain that they can. I've been in a lot of really tough negotiations where it seems like we're wasting time for months and months and months, like it feels like right now. And suddenly there's some moment that helps crystallize things. And because of the conversations that we've been having, in a single day, a solution can come together. I think that's what we need right now, because we're down to 50 or 60 single days. So we got to get with it. it's there if we're willing to do it. And if we're willing to acknowledge each other's pain that is real, and contributions and collective action that sometimes takes different forms and maybe isn't huge volumes, but it's meaningful. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Commissioner López. John Entsminger, the draw of the high card.
So we were each given 6 minutes. So cumulatively, my partners here had 36 minutes. We're sitting at 55 minutes. So we're no better at time management than we are at water management. So I will do what Nevada can to restore us to equilibrium and keep my comments as succinct as possible. If you distill down what my 6 partners just said, I believe there's 3 common things. Here's all the great things my state has done. Here's how hard/impossible it is to do anymore. And here are all the reasons why other people should have to do more. And as long as we keep polishing those arguments and repeating them to each other, we are going nowhere. When we executed the 07 guidelines, my youngest son was born November 30th, 2007, 12 days before the execution of the 2007 guidelines. He turned 18 November 30th, a legal adult. And as imperfect as they are, and we can all look back and see how imperfect the 07 guidelines were and what we could have done differently with hindsight, they've kept the peace. I went into this process, 4 years ago, 2 years ago, advocating strenuously for a 20 to 30 year deal, a robust, durable, multi-decadal deal to give certainty to the basin. I no longer believe that's possible. With the time we have left, with the hydrology that we're facing, I think the best possible outcome at this juncture is probably a 5-year operating plan to keep us out of court. And what goes into a 5-year operating plan? It's not that complicated. We need a PAL to Meade release curve. We need an understanding of how the CRISP reservoirs are going to be operated to protect critical infrastructure at Lake Powell. We need to know what the upper basin actions are. We need to know what the lower basin actions are. And we need to know what the rules for storing water in both basins are for these pools and ICS. For every water user in the room, farmers, ranchers, tribes, municipalities, NGOs, they care about in-stream flows, which one of those 5 elements are you willing to die on the hill for? Because none of them are worth it. None of them are worth driving the car into the ditch for. We're all in the same rowboat. The first one to fire a shot puts a hole in the boat and sinks it. Thank you.
I want to thank the principals for their insights today, and if you would, please help me thank them again and wish them the best of success in the next 59 days. With that, that wraps up 2025 CRWUA, and thank you all for coming. We look forward to seeing you next year. Safe travels, and happy holidays.
All right, see ya.